At my cousin's graduation party, my aunt grabbed my sleeve and said, "How much do you actually remember about the fire?" I was 6 years old when my family's rental cabin burned. That's what I've always been told, that I was 6, that the fire started in the kitchen, and that everyone got out. When I asked why I had a fragmented memory of lying on the ground outside while adults stood over me, my mother said I'd fainted from smoke inhalation and come around quickly. Perfectly normal response to a frightening event for a small child, nothing to worry about. For years I had one recurring image that I couldn't place, a ceiling with fluorescent panels, a woman with dark hair writing something on a clipboard, not looking at me, speaking to someone I couldn't see. The feeling of not being able to move my arms. I mentioned it once to a therapist at 15, and she said trauma memory in young children was fragmentary and non-linear. I accepted that. I accepted it until last June, when my Aunt Petra gripped my arm near the drinks table and asked me that question. Petra is my father's older sister. She has always been warm but careful, someone who chooses every word before releasing it. Seeing her careless was like watching a surgeon drop a scalpel. I knew immediately something was wrong. I said, "I remember smoke. I remember being outside." "Why?" She looked across the yard toward my father, who was laughing at something near the grill. Her hand tightened on my arm. "Come inside for a minute." She took me to the spare bedroom off the hallway and closed the door behind us. When she turned around, her face had rearranged into something I hadn't seen on her before. "You weren't breathing when they found you," she said. "Your father pulled you out, but it had already been too long. You weren't breathing, and you had no pulse. They called 911, but the cabin was 40 minutes from the nearest hospital." I sat down on the edge of the bed. "Your father called someone. A man he knew through work. I never knew the details, and I still don't. Not fully. This man made 2 phone calls, and 25 minutes later, a vehicle arrived. Not an ambulance. A black SUV with 3 people inside." I started to say something. She held up her hand. "They worked on you for almost half an hour in the back of that vehicle. Your mother wasn't allowed inside. She stood on the road. Your father stood with her. And then one of the people opened the door and said you had a pulse. The fluorescent ceiling. The woman with the clipboard. The official story, the one your parents told everyone, including you, was that you regained consciousness on your own before the paramedics arrived. Minor smoke inhalation. No hospitalization required." She paused. "That is not what happened." I asked her why she was telling me now. She looked at the floor. "Because last month your father received a letter. I saw the envelope on his kitchen counter when I was helping him with something. There was no return address, but there was a symbol in the corner. I recognized it. It was the same symbol on the equipment they used on you that night." She looked up. "I think they're checking in. I think something's changed." I asked what the symbol looked like. She described it a small geometric mark, 3 overlapping lines forming a kind of angular figure. I took out my phone and drew it while she watched. She nodded. I went back to the party. My father hugged me when I passed him and asked if I was having a good time. I told him yes. He smiled and turned back to his conversation. That night, I searched the symbol description across 3 different variations, nothing official. But I found a forum thread from 4 years ago, a woman asking if anyone had ever been saved by people who arrived in unmarked vehicles, who took samples and left no paperwork, who her family had never been able to explain. Underneath it were 11 replies, different accidents, different states, different years, same absence of records, same confusion. One person wrote, "I have a memory from when I was supposedly unconscious. I've never been able to get anyone to confirm it." I closed the browser and looked at my hands for a long time. My aunt texted me the next morning. "Don't ask your father directly. Not until you know more. He'll shut it down, and then they'll know you're asking." I haven't asked him, but 2 weeks ago, I found a box in my own closet, one my mother packed when I left for college. Things from my childhood bedroom she thought I'd want. At the bottom, under old birthday cards and school photos, was a folded paper I didn't recognize. A discharge summary with no hospital letterhead. My name, my date of birth, a date that matches the night of the fire. At the bottom, a handwritten note in the margin. 7 words. "Recovery exceeded projected parameters. Continue standard monitoring protocol." I've read it probably 40 times. I still don't know what parameters they were projecting. I don't know what standard monitoring looks like, or who's conducting it. I don't know what my father agreed to in exchange for whatever they did. What I know is there's a file somewhere with my name on it, and I didn't put anything in it. I spent the next 3 days sitting at my desk in my apartment, staring at that piece of paper until the text started to blur. It wasn't standard printer paper. It was heavier, slightly off-white, with a texture like linen. There were no watermarks, no property of Street Jude's or County General. Just my name. A list of vitals that looked like gibberish: heart rate 0, respiratory rate 0, followed by a series of numbers under a column labeled intervention phase, and then that note. Recovery exceeded projected parameters. I thought about my life since I was 6. I'd always been healthy, more than healthy. I realized, with a sudden cold prickle at the back of my neck, that I hadn't seen a doctor for anything other than a routine physical in 20 years. I didn't get the flu when it went through my dorm in college. I didn't get the stomach bugs my friends got. I'd broken my arm falling off a bike when I was 10, and the doctor at the ER had been confused by the X-ray a week later. "You're a fast healer," he'd said, laughing it off. "Must be those young bones." I looked at the scar on my forearm from that break. It was almost invisible. I needed to see my father, not to ask him. Petra was right. He'd lie, but to see what he was hiding. He lived 2 hours away in the house I grew up in. My mother was away on a retreat with her church group for the weekend. It was the only window I'd have to look through his office without being interrupted. I drove up on Saturday morning. The weather was gray and thick with the kind of mist that clings to your windshield. When I pulled into the driveway, my father's truck was gone. He usually spent Saturday mornings at the hardware store or the range. I used my spare key. The house smelled like wood smoke and the vanilla candles my mother liked. It felt aggressive in its normalcy. I went straight to the den. My father is a meticulous man. He worked in logistics for a defense contractor for 30 years before he retired. His office reflected that rows of binders, everything labeled, a desk that looked like it had been cleared with a ruler. I started with the filing cabinets. Taxes, insurance, home repairs, upstairs. Nothing. Then I checked the bottom drawer of his desk. It was locked. I'm not a thief or a private eye. I felt sick to my stomach doing it, but I found the key in the top of a decorative urn on the bookshelf, the same place he'd hidden the key to the liquor cabinet when I was a teenager. Some habits don't change. Inside the drawer was a single accordion folder. It didn't have a label. I opened it on the desk. The first thing I saw was the envelope Petra had described. It was heavy, like the paper in my closet. In the top left corner was the symbol, 3 overlapping lines, sharp and precise. There was no stamp. It hadn't been mailed. It had been delivered. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a list of dates. The 14th of August, 2012, the 20th of November, 2015, and the 2nd of March, 2019, the 12th of June, 2024. Next to each date was a set of coordinates and a time. I recognized the 2019 date. That was the day I'd graduated college. The coordinates, I plugged them into my phone, pointed to the exact corner of the quad where the ceremony took place. They had been there. Every major milestone. They were watching. At the bottom of the list was a new entry. The 30th of October, 2026. That was 6 months away. Next to it, instead of coordinates, was a single word. Extraction. The floor felt like it was tilting. Extraction doesn't mean a checkup. It doesn't mean monitoring. I heard the garage door groan open. I scrambled. I put the paper back, locked the drawer, dropped the key in the urn, and made it to the kitchen just as the door from the garage opened. I was standing by the sink, filling a glass of water I didn't want. My hands shaking so hard the glass rattled against the faucet. "Ben?" my father said, surprised. He was carrying a bag of salt for the water softener. "What are you doing here? I thought you were working this weekend." "Finished early," I said. My voice sounded thin, like it was coming from someone else. "Thought I'd come by and see if you needed help with anything. Mom's away, right?" He set the bag down and looked at me. My father has these very pale blue eyes that always seem to be measuring something. For the first time in my life, I felt like a specimen under a lens. "You okay, son? You look a little peaked." "Just tired," I said. "Long drive." He nodded, but he didn't look away. "Well, since you're here, let's grab some lunch." Pete's Diner? We sat in a booth at Pete's, the same booth we'd sat in 100 times. He talked about the lawn, the weather, the neighbor's dog. I watched his hands, large, calloused, capable hands. The hands that had pulled me out of a burning cabin. The hands that had presumably signed a contract to bring me back to life. "Dad," I said, interrupting him mid-sentence. "Do you ever think about the fire? At the cabin?" He didn't blink. He didn't pause. He just took a bite of his club sandwich, chewed, and swallowed. "Not if I can help it." "Why? That's a strange thing to bring up over lunch." I've been having these dreams lately, of a room with white lights, a woman with a clipboard." He set his sandwich down. The air between us suddenly felt very heavy. "Trauma does that, Ben. The brain tries to fill in the blanks when you're unconscious. Your mother and I told you everything there was to tell. It was a long time ago. Let it stay there." "Petra told me I died," I said. The silence that followed was absolute. The clinking of silverware and the murmur of other diners seemed to fade into a dull hum. My father didn't get angry. He didn't deny it. He just leaned back in the booth and looked at me with a profound, weary sadness. "Petra always did talk too much," he said quietly. "Is it true? You were gone, Ben. Your heart had stopped. Your mother was screaming. I couldn't just let you go. I had a contact, someone from the old days at the firm. They told me they had a medical response team nearby. They said they could help." "Who are they, Dad?" "I don't know," he said, and for the first time, I knew he was lying. He knew exactly who they were. "They saved your life. That's all that matters. They brought you back and they didn't charge us a dime. They just asked for occasional updates on your health, routine stuff." "Extraction," I said. He froze. The color drained out of his face, leaving it a sickly, mottled gray. "Where did you see that?" "In your desk, in the folder with the symbol." He grabbed my wrist across the table. His grip was like iron. "You shouldn't have gone in there, Ben. You have no idea what you've done." "What is extraction?" I whispered. "Are they taking me back?" He let go of my wrist and covered his face with his hands. "They told me the process was a loan. I didn't. I thought they meant money or information. I didn't realize they meant times you. I'm 26 years old. I'm a person. They can't just extract me. They don't see you as a person," he said, looking up. His eyes were wet. "They see you as a successful trial. You've reached the end of the observation period. They want to see how the cellular regeneration held up over 2 decades. They want to see what's inside you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He started typing something frantically. "We have to go," he said. "Now, if you've been searching that symbol, if you've been talking to Petra, they already know you're compromised. The monitoring isn't just dates and coordinates, Ben. It's in the air. It's in the grid. I'm not going anywhere until you tell me the name of the company." He grabbed his jacket. "It's not a company. It's a project. A black site medical initiative called Ethelgard. Now get in the truck." We didn't go back to the house. He drove past the turnoff, heading north toward the state forest. He was driving fast, checking his mirrors every few seconds. I watched the speedometer climb. 80, 85, 90. "Where are we going?" "To someone who can help us disappear. Or at least buy us some time." "Dad, you're scaring me." "Good," he snapped. "You should be scared. I spent 20 years pretending this day wouldn't come. I traded your future for your life, and I'd do it again. But God help me, I won't let them take you to a lab." We were 10 miles into the forest when the black SUV appeared in the rearview mirror. It didn't have lights or sirens. It didn't try to pass. It just sat there, a dark, gleaming shape in the mist, maintaining a perfect distance. My father cursed and floored it. The truck roared, the engine straining. "They're early," he whispered. "They weren't supposed to come until October. Maybe they changed the parameters," I said. "The SUV didn't ram us. It didn't have to." As we rounded a sharp curve near the creek, my father suddenly slumped over the wheel. His hands fell limp. His eyes stayed open, but the light in them just vanished. I grabbed the wheel, screaming as needed, but the truck was already careening off the shoulder. We hit a stand of young pines, the airbags exploding in a flash of white powder and heat. Everything went quiet. I struggled against the airbag, my chest heaving. My father was leaning against the door, breathing shallowly, but he was unconscious. I tried my door. jammed. I kicked the window, but the glass was reinforced. Then, the sound of tires on gravel. The black SUV pulled up to the edge of the embankment. 3 people got out. They were wearing charcoal gray suits, looking more like mid-level accountants than a tactical team. One of them, a woman with dark hair pulled into a tight bun, walked down the slope toward the truck. She didn't look angry. She didn't look excited. She looked like she was checking a grocery list. She reached the passenger side window and tapped on it. I backed away, pressing myself against the center console. She held up a small device, a tablet of some kind, and pressed it against the glass. The window didn't break. It simply dissolved, the glass turning into a fine, shimmering dust that blew away in the wind. "Hello, Benjamin," she said. Her voice was pleasant, professional. "It's been a long time. You've grown quite well. What did you do to him?" I pointed at my father. "A temporary neural dampener. He'll be fine in an hour." He was becoming a liability to the schedule. She reached into the cab, not to grab me, but to touch my arm. Her fingers were cold. "We saw your search history. We saw your visit to the office. We decided to move the timeline up. We can't have the asset becoming distressed. It affects the blood chemistry. I'm not an asset. I'm a person." She smiled then, a small, pitying thing. "Benjamin, you died in a fire 20 years ago. What's walking around now is 60% us. You're a marvel of biological engineering. You've had a very nice 20 years of life that you weren't supposed to have. Now, it's time to contribute to the next generation of the project." I looked at my father. I looked at the woods. I felt a sudden, surging heat in my chest. Not fear, but something else. A physical pressure. "I won't go," I said. The woman sighed. "We expected resistance. It's part of the recovery exceeding parameters note. Your willpower was always an outlier." She nodded to the 2 men behind her. They started down the hill carrying a gurney, but as they reached the truck, something happened. I felt a snap in my mind, like a circuit breaker flipping. The woman's eyes widened. She stepped back, looking at the tablet in her hand. "Wait," she said. "His vitals, they're spiking." I didn't know what I was doing, but I felt a connection to the air, to the metal of the truck, to the very ground. It was like I could see the lines of energy holding everything together. I pushed, not with my hands, but with that heat in my chest. The woman was thrown backward, landing 10 feet away in the brush. The 2 men stopped, their faces finally showing something like emotion, confusion, fear. I scrambled out of the broken window. My father stirred, groaning. "Stay back!" I yelled. The woman stood up, brushing dirt from her suit. She wasn't hurt. She looked fascinated. "Remarkable," she whispered. "The integration has gone deeper than we hypothesized. You're not just a host anymore, Benjamin. You've adapted the tech." "Leave us alone," I said. The ground under my feet felt like it was vibrating. "We can't do that," she said. "But we can renegotiate. If you come with us willingly, your father stays here. He lives out his life in peace. If you fight, well, we've already seen how easy it is to turn him off." I looked at my father. He was looking at me now, his eyes clear but filled with terror. He shook his head, a tiny, desperate movement. I knew then that there was no disappearing. There was no hiding. You can't hide from the thing that's literally inside yourself. "Ben, don't," my father rasped. I looked at the woman. "The protocol. You said I was being monitored. Does that mean you know everything I do?" "Relatively, yes." "Then you know I've already sent the file I found in the desk to 3 different cloud servers, set on a dead man's switch." I lied. The lie felt solid in my mouth, reinforced by the strange power humming in my blood. "If I don't check in every 12 hours, that symbol and the list of coordinates go to every major news outlet in the country, and my Aunt Petra knows. She'll talk." The woman paused. She consulted her tablet. "You didn't have time to do that. I have those exceeded parameters, remember? I'm faster than you think." She studied me for a long time. The wind whistled through the broken pines. Finally, she tucked the tablet into her jacket. "A stalemate," she said. "For now. We will delay the extraction. But Benjamin, the hardware inside you has an expiration date. It was never meant to be permanent. Without maintenance, you will begin to degrade. In 5 years, perhaps 10, the systems will fail, and then the fire will finally catch up to you." "I'll take my chances with a normal life," I said. "Very well." She signaled to the men. They retreated to the SUV. "We'll be watching. We're always interested in how the uncontrolled samples fare in the wild." She climbed into the vehicle, and within seconds, they were gone. The SUV disappearing into the mist as if it had never been there. I fell to my knees in the dirt. The heat in my chest vanished, leaving me feeling hollow and impossibly tired. My father stumbled out of the truck and wrapped his arms around me. He didn't say anything. He just held me, shaking. We didn't go to the police. We didn't tell my mother. We spent the afternoon at a local garage getting the truck towed, making up a story about a deer and a slick road. I'm back in my apartment now. It's been 3 weeks. I haven't seen any black SUVs. I haven't received any more letters. But sometimes, when it's very quiet, I can hear a faint, rhythmic hum in my ears. It sounds like a cooling fan, or a heartbeat that isn't mine. I went to a regular doctor yesterday. I told him I'd been feeling fatigued. He ran a full blood panel. Today, he called me back. He sounded confused. "Ben, I'm looking at your results. Everything is, well, it's perfect. It's too perfect. I've never seen markers like this. Your white cell count is exactly at the median. Your oxygen saturation is a flat 100%. It's like looking at a textbook illustration instead of a real person." I thanked him and hung up. The perfect blood work results sat on my kitchen counter for a week. I didn't frame them, but I didn't throw them away either. They were a reminder that I was a high-performance machine wearing a human skin suit. Every time I took a flight of stairs and didn't lose my breath, or every time a paper cut closed up and vanished within an hour, I felt the weight of that word again. Asset. I stopped going to the gym. It felt like cheating, or worse, like I was just stress testing their equipment for them. Instead, I started driving. No destination, just hours on the interstate, watching the horizon. I was looking for those black SUVs. I was looking for the woman with the bun. I was looking for anything that didn't fit. I found it on a Tuesday, parked outside a hardware store in a town I'd never visited. It wasn't an SUV. It was a silver sedan, unremarkable in every way except for the driver. He was sitting perfectly still, hands at 10 and 2, staring straight ahead. He didn't have a phone out. He wasn't listening to the radio. He was just there. I pulled into the space next to him. My heart didn't race. My parameters wouldn't allow it, but I felt that familiar hum behind my ribs. I rolled down my window. He didn't turn his head. "Are you the new monitor?" I asked. The man didn't move for a long 10 seconds. Then, his head snapped toward me with a mechanical precision that made my skin crawl. He looked like he was about 40, with a face so symmetrical it felt manufactured. "Observation is passive, Benjamin," he said. His voice had no texture. "Interaction is a breach of your own requested terms." I changed my mind, I said. "I want to know what the maintenance looks like." The woman said I'd degrade. Was she lying? The man turned back to the windshield. "Systemic degradation is a mathematical certainty in all closed loops. The biological host eventually rejects the synthetic integration. It starts with the sensory input. Colors will seem too bright. Sounds will begin to overlap. Then, the motor functions will desync. How long? The data suggests a window of 36 to 48 months. Without a level 4 recalibration, the integration will suffer a terminal cascade. 36 months, 3 years. And if I come in for the recalibration, I asked, what happens to the Ben part of me? The man finally looked at me again, and for a split second, I saw something in his eyes. It wasn't pity, it was recognition, like one piece of software looking at another. The Ben part is the interface, he said. In a recalibration, the interface is wiped to clear the cache. You would survive, but you wouldn't remember the fire, or the party, or the man you call your father. I felt a coldness settle over me that no internal heater could fix. They weren't just saving my life, they were renting my body, and planned on evicting my soul when the lease was up. "Get away from me," I whispered. "We are never away, Benjamin. We are the reason you are here." He put the car in reverse and backed out. He didn't look back. I drove home in a daze. I didn't go to my apartment. I went back to my father's house. I didn't knock. I walked in and found him in the garage, tinkering with an old lawnmower. He looked older than he had 3 weeks ago. The secret was eating him alive. "Dad," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "I met one of them today." He dropped the wrench. It hit the concrete with a sharp times clang. "Did they hurt you?" "No, they just told me the price of staying me. I've got 3 years, Dad. 3 years before I start to glitch out." He sat down on a grease-stained stool and put his head in his hands. I thought if I gave you enough time, you'd find a way. You were always so smart, Ben, even before the fire. There is no finding a way through this kind of tech," I said, walking over to him. I put my hand on his shoulder. I could feel his heart beating fast, ragged, human. "But I'm not going to spend those 3 years being a sample in a jar, and I'm not going to let them wipe the cache. What are you going to do?" "I'm going to find the others," I said. "The woman on the forum," the 11 replies. "If they're all assets, then they're all ticking clocks. Maybe if we pool the data, we can find the one thing Ethelgard didn't account for." "And what's that?" I looked at my hands. They were steady. They were strong. They were a gift from a monster, but they were mine for now. "Human error," I said. "They think they're running a program, but they're dealing with people, and people don't always follow the code." I left him there and went to my car. I pulled up the forum post again. I messaged the woman who'd started the thread. "My name is Ben," I wrote. "I remember the clipboard too. We need to talk before our time runs out." I hit send. The hum in my chest didn't go away, but for the first time, it didn't feel like a countdown. It felt like an engine. I put the car in gear and pulled out of the driveway, leaving the monitoring eyes behind in the rear view. I don't know how this ends. I don't know if I'll die in a hospital bed or a lab or on the side of the road, but I know one thing. They didn't just give me life. They gave me a reason to fight for it. And if I'm going to degrade, I'm going to make sure I leave a hell of a wreck behind. I spent the next 48 hours waiting for a notification. I lived on coffee. I couldn't taste and watched the cursor blink on my laptop screen like a digital pulse. Every time the floorboard creaked, I checked the window. I didn't see the silver sedan again, but the air felt different, tight, like the atmosphere before a massive storm. Then, at 3:14 a.m. on Thursday, my laptop chimed. "User RedSky88 has sent you a private message." I clicked it so fast I nearly cracked the trackpad. "Ben," it read. "If you're seeing this, you've moved past the denial phase. Don't respond here. They own the servers. Go to the coordinates below on Saturday at noon. Come alone. If you see a black SUV, keep driving and never look back." The coordinates pointed to a derelict rest stop off a defunct highway in northern Pennsylvania. It was a 4-hour drive through nothing but pine trees and rusted-out gas stations. I didn't tell my father. I didn't tell Petra. I left my phone on my kitchen counter. If I was being tracked by the hardware inside me, the phone was just a secondary beacon I didn't need. I took the old truck. It felt more honest. The rest stop was a ghost. The concrete was cracked, weeds pushing through like jagged teeth. A single car was parked near the boarded-up vending machines, a beat-up blue hatchback with a cracked windshield. A woman was standing near the edge of the woods. She looked about 35, wearing a heavy flannel shirt and jeans. She looked tired in a way that sleep wouldn't fix. She was holding a small, handheld device that looked like a modified stud finder. As I walked toward her, the device started chirping. The closer I got, the faster it screamed. "You're hot," she said, her voice raspy. She didn't offer a hand. She just watched the screen. "Frequency 440.2, high-end integration. You must be a Class A recovery." "I'm Ben," I said. "Sarah," she replied, finally looking up. Her eyes were dark and hollow. "I was 8 when my appendix burst in the middle of a camping trip. Peritonitis. I was dead for 12 minutes before the medics arrived." "How long have you known?" "6 years. My degradation started 6 months ago." She held out her left hand. It was trembling, not a shake, but a rhythmic, mechanical twitch. Like a glitching animation. The motor desync, just like they promised. "They told me I have 3 years," I said. Sarah laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "They tell everyone 3 years, once they get caught. It keeps you docile. It keeps you hoping for a recalibration that never comes. The truth is, once the twitch starts, you've got maybe a year before the synthetic tissue starts to necrotize. Your body finally realizes it's hosting a foreign god, and it tries to burn itself down to get rid of it." I looked at her hand. The twitch was perfect, exactly every 1.5 seconds. Why did you call me here? She turned and walked toward the hatchback. She popped the trunk, revealing a mess of wires, car batteries, and a heavy copper coil. Because Ethelgard isn't a company, it's a closed-loop experiment. We aren't just saved people, Ben. We're nodes. They use us to process data, to test cellular resilience in real-time environments. Every time you heal a cut, they get a packet of data. Every time your heart rate stays flat during a car wreck, they learn how to perfect the next batch. So how do we stop it? We don't stop them, she said, looking back at the empty highway. We disconnect. I've spent 3 years talking to people like us. Most of them went back for the recalibration. They never came out. But one guy, a tech who worked for the project before he got cancer and saved himself, he told me about the failsafe. She pointed to the copper coil. The integration is tied to your nervous system via a subdermal mesh. It runs on a low-frequency broadcast. If you hit that mesh with a specific electromagnetic pulse, it shorts out the synthetic components. It doesn't kill you, but it blinds the hardware. You become a dark node. What's the catch? I asked. My parameters were already flagging the risk. The catch is that your body has been leaning on that tech for 20 years. If we shut it down, you'll be normal. You'll get sick. You'll age. You'll feel every ache and pain you've been skipping since you were 6. And the shock might stop your heart again. It's a 50-50 shot at being a regular human, or dying on this pavement. I looked at the woods. I thought about the woman with the bun, the silver sedan, and the feeling of my father's trembling hand on my shoulder. I thought about the wiped cache, the idea of living forever as a hollowed-out version of myself, a library with all the books burned. Do it, I said. Lie down, Sarah commanded, and bite on this. She handed me a piece of heavy rubber tubing. I lay down on the cold, cracked concrete. The sky was a pale, uncaring blue. Sarah positioned the copper coil over my chest, right where the heat always moved. If this works, she whispered, you're going to feel the fire again, the one from when you were 6. Your brain is going to catch up on 20 years of sensory data all at once. Don't fight it, just go through it. She reached for a switch on the car battery. 3, 2, 1. The world didn't explode. It imploded. A white-hot spike of lightning slammed into my sternum. Every muscle in my body locked. My back arched off the ground so hard I felt my vertebrae pop. The rubber tubing between my teeth tasted like burnt salt. And then, the fire came back. I wasn't in Pennsylvania anymore. I was in the cabin. I could smell the melting plastic of the toaster. I could feel the blistering heat of the floorboards. I felt the smoke, thick, oily, and suffocating, filling my lungs for the first time in 2 decades. I felt the terrifying, heavy silence of my own heart stopping. I screamed, but there was no air to carry the sound. I was drowning in 20 years of delayed pain. My broken arm from 10 years ago suddenly throbbed. The flu I never had burned through my veins. The exhaustion of 1,000 sleepless nights crashed over me like a tidal wave. Recovery exceeded projected parameters. The words flashed in my mind, then began to dissolve, the letters melting into black sludge. Then, silence. I opened my eyes. The sky was still blue, but it wasn't perfect anymore. It was grainy. There were floaters in my vision. My chest hurt a deep, dull ache that felt wonderful. I could feel the grit of the concrete against my skin. I could feel the wind, and it was cold. I was shivering. I hadn't shivered since I was 6. Sarah was leaning over me, her face wet with tears. Ben, talk to me. I spat out the rubber tubing. My throat felt like I'd swallowed glass. I feel like hell, I croaked. She let out a sob and slumped back against the car. It worked. The device. It's dead. You're offline. I sat up slowly. Every joint in my body protested. My left knee clicked. My head throbbed. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever felt. I looked at my hands. They weren't steady anymore. There was a slight natural tremor in my fingers, the sign of a living, breathing, imperfect nervous system. What about you? I asked. She looked at her twitching hand. It was still moving. 1.5 seconds. Twitch. 1.5 seconds. Twitch. The coil only had enough charge for 1, she said quietly. I had to make sure the tech worked on a Class A first. I'm Class C. I've got time to build another one. Now that I know it won't kill you. I'm not leaving you here, I said, struggling to my feet. My legs felt heavy, like they were made of lead, instead of high-grade carbon fiber integration. You have to, she said, handing me a small, handwritten map. They'll be here in 20 minutes. They'll detect the node failure. You need to get to this address in Ohio. It's a dead zone, old mining tunnels. There are others there. Real people, not assets. Sarah, go, Ben. Before they find out you're just a man again. They don't have any use for men, only machines. I looked at her one last time. She looked exhausted, but her eyes were bright with a strange kind of triumph. I got into the old truck. It took 3 tries to turn the key. My coordination was off. My timing was human. I drove away just as a black SUV appeared on the horizon, moving with a silent, predatory speed. I'm in a motel now, 300 miles away. My fever is 101 degrees. My back is killing me. I have a headache that feels like a railroad spike. I've thrown up twice. I've never felt more alive. The Ohio state line was a blur of rain and rusted iron. I drove through the night, my body screaming in a language I was still learning to translate. Every bump in the road sent a jolt of genuine, unadulterated pain through my spine. My internal stabilizers were gone. I was just a skeleton in a bag of meat, and the meat was exhausting. I reached the coordinates Sarah had given me just as the sun started to bleed over a landscape of jagged hills and abandoned coal tipples. It was an old mining town called Callaway, a place the 20th century had chewed up and spat out. The address led to a sagging warehouse behind a line of boarded-up company houses. I pulled the truck into the shadows of a collapsing loading dock. I sat there for a second, my hands gripped tight on the steering wheel. They were shaking. Not a glitch tremor, but the cold, adrenaline-soaked shake of a human being who was terrified and pushing through it anyway. I climbed out of the cab and almost fell. My sense of balance was was no longer a calibrated gyro sensor. It was just fluid in my inner ear, and right now, that fluid was sloshing around like a stormy sea. "Anyone here?" I called out. My voice was a wreck. A door at the back of the warehouse creaked open. A man stepped out. He looked to be in his 60s, wearing a grease-stained jumpsuit. He held a heavy industrial flashlight, the beam cutting through the morning mist. He didn't point it at my face. He pointed it at my chest. He watched the beam for a long time, then he lowered it. "You're dark," he said. It wasn't a question. No flicker, no pulse. "Sarah sent me," I croaked. The man's face softened, the deep lines around his mouth sagging with relief. "I'm Miller. Get inside. You look like you're about to come apart at the seams." The inside of the warehouse was a labyrinth of salvaged tech and old camping gear. There were 3 other people there. A girl no older than 19 sitting on a crate, staring at a laptop. A man in his 40s, sharpening a knife with obsessive focus. And an older woman hovering over a localized server rack. "This is Ben," Miller announced. "Class A. He just went through the pulse." The girl on the crate looked up. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and deeply haunted. "Class A? How's the sensory flood?" "Everything is too loud," I said, leaning against a cold brick wall. "And everything hurts." "That's the nervous system remapping," she said. "I'm Jax. I went dark 2 years ago. The pain stays for a month, then it just becomes noise. You get used to it." Miller brought me a bottle of water and a couple of aspirin. I took them like they were the holy grail. "Sarah didn't make it, did she?" the woman at the server asked. "She didn't turn around. She was still there when I left," I said. "The SUV was coming." She gave me the map. She stayed to build another coil. A heavy silence settled over the room. It was the silence of people who had lost a lot of Sarahs over the years. "We don't have much time," Jax said, turning her laptop toward me. "When a Class A goes dark, the grid doesn't just notice, it panics. You're a massive hole in their data stream, Ben. To Ethelgard, you're not just a lost asset, you're a leak. They'll triangulate the last known location of your signal and start a sweep." "They already did," I said. "But Sarah's device. It worked. I'm offline." "You're offline from the Times broadcast," Miller said, pacing the floor. "But the physical hardware is still inside you. It's dormant, but it's made of rare earth minerals and synthetic proteins. They have scanners that can pick up the molecular signature from a mile away if they fly low enough." "So we leave," I said. "Go deeper into the mines." "No," Miller said, his eyes turning hard. "We stop running. We've been hiding in the dark for a decade, waiting for our expiration dates. But you brought us something we haven't had in a long time. You brought us a Class A signature, even dormant. Your hardware has the master encryption keys for the local node." "What does that mean?" Jax stood up, her face lit by the blue glow of her screen. "It means if we plug you in, not the broadcast, but a hard line to the neural mesh behind your ear, we can ghost the entire network. We can send a kill command to every monitoring SUV within a 50-mile radius. We can make them think we all died. We can give everyone in the forum their lives back." I looked at the wires snaking across the floor. I thought about the white-hot spike of the pulse Sarah had given me. I thought about the wiped cache the man in the silver sedan had promised. "It'll hurt," I said. "Worse than the fire," Jax admitted. "You'll be a lightning rod for the whole sector's data, but once it's done, we'll be invisible, truly invisible." I looked at my hands. They were still shaking. I thought about my father, sitting in his garage, waiting for a son who was 60% machine. I thought about Petra, grabbing my sleeve at a party because she couldn't keep the lie anymore. "How do we start?" I asked. Miller led me to a chair in the center of the room. It was an old dental chair, bolted to the floor. Above it hung a cluster of fiber optic cables that looked like a digital crown of thorns. "Lie back, Ben," Miller said. I sat down. The leather was cold. Jax approached me with a small, surgical needle connected to a thick black wire. She felt the skin behind my left ear, right where the bone met the jaw. "The port is right here," she whispered. "They glue it into your mastoid bone. It's been waiting for a connection since you were 6. I closed my eyes. I could hear the rain hitting the warehouse roof. I could hear the hum of the server. I could hear my own heart thudding away in my chest, uneven, fragile, and mine. "Do it," I said. I felt a sharp prick, and then a sensation like liquid ice being poured directly into my brain. My vision didn't go black. It went white. A billion lines of code screamed through my consciousness. I saw every asset in the state. I saw the black SUVs idling in parking lots. I saw the woman with the bun sitting in a clean, white office, looking at a map of Ohio. I saw my own file. Benjamin Miller, status, lost, target found. The system whispered in my mind. "Now, Jax," I screamed, though I didn't know if my mouth was actually moving. I felt her fingers flying over the keyboard. I felt the surge of the warehouse's power grid. I reached into the white light of the network, and for a second, I wasn't a man or a machine. I was the ghost in the wires. I found the command line. I found the extract protocol. I didn't delete it. I reversed it. Status, deceased. Reason, terminal system, failure. I applied it to my file. Then Sarah's, then Jax's, then every name I could find in the local cache. One by one, the red dots on the digital map turned gray. The monitoring SUVs slowed down. The signals flatlined. To Ethelgard, we all just blinked out of existence. A mass hardware failure. A statistical anomaly. The feedback hit me like a physical blow. I was thrown forward out of the chair, the wire ripping free from behind my ear. I hit the concrete hard, the taste of copper filling my mouth. The warehouse went dark. The servers died. The only sound was the rain. I lay there for a long time, gasping for air. Miller was over me, his hand on my back. "You did it, Ben," he whispered. "We're ghosts." I rolled over onto my back. My head felt like it had been cracked open with a sledgehammer, and my vision was blurry. But when I looked up at the rafters of the old warehouse, I didn't see coordinates. I didn't see data packets. I just saw wood and shadows and dust. I stayed in Callaway for a week while the fever broke. We spent the time burying the tech, stripping the warehouse, and preparing to scatter. We weren't a project anymore. We were just 5 people with bad health and a lot of lost time. I drove back home on a Sunday. I pulled into my father's driveway at dusk. He was sitting on the porch, a beer in his hand, looking at the road. When he saw the truck, he stood up so fast, he knocked the bottle over. I got out of the car. I walked up the stairs. I was limping. I had dark circles under my eyes. I looked like a man who had been through a war. "Ben," he whispered. It's over, Dad, I said. I reached out and took his hand. His hand was warm. My hand was warm. For the first time since I was 6 years old, our heartbeats didn't have to match a projected parameter. They think I'm dead, I said. The asset is gone. He pulled me into a hug, and I felt him sob into my shoulder. I didn't feel a hum in my chest. I didn't feel a spike in my vitals. I just felt my father's arms around me, and the smell of the damp earth, and the weight of a life that was finally, legally, and biologically my own. I still have the scar behind my ear. Sometimes, when the weather changes, it aches. Sometimes I get a cold that lasts for 2 weeks, and sometimes my knees hurt when I run. I love every second of it. The woman in the bun is probably still out there, looking at a map of gray dots, wondering how the perfect experiment turned into a graveyard. Let her wonder. I'm busy living, and for a guy who died 20 years ago, I'm getting pretty good at it. 6 months after Callaway, the world stopped feeling like a simulation and started feeling like a chore. That was the victory. I spent the autumn working at a small engine repair shop 3 towns over from my father. My hands were always covered in grease, my knuckles were permanently barked, and I developed a slight hitch in my right hip that acted up whenever the humidity spiked. I cherished that limp. It was a physical receipt for a life I was finally paying for myself. I didn't use the internet for anything other than checking the weather. I didn't have a smartphone. I had a burner flip phone with 3 numbers in it. Dad, Petra, and an emergency contact for Jax that I hoped I'd never have to dial. The silence from Ethelgard was absolute. It was the kind of silence that usually precedes a scream. But as the months bled into winter, I started to believe the status, deceased command, had actually stuck. To a bureaucracy of algorithms, a dead node is just a line of code to be archived. They don't send investigators to a graveyard unless the bodies start walking. But then, the dreams changed. They weren't the old dreams of white clipboards and fluorescent lights. They were visceral, sensory overloads. I'd be sleeping in my small apartment, and suddenly I could hear the heartbeat of the person in the apartment next door. I could smell the ozone of a storm 3 counties away. I could feel the electricity humming in the walls, vibrating against my teeth like a tuning fork. I woke up one Tuesday in December with blood on my pillow. It wasn't a lot, just a thin, watery streak from the port behind my left ear. I didn't call my father. I called Jax. It's starting, I said when she picked up. The sensory bleed? Her voice was tight. I've been getting it too. For about 3 weeks. My vision flickers to thermal when I get a headache. We're dark nodes, Jax. The hardware is dormant. Why is it waking up? It's not waking up, Ben, she whispered. It's decaying. The pulse Sarah gave you. It didn't remove the tech. It just broke the governor. The mesh is still woven into your brain, but there's no signal telling it how to behave. It's like a radio stuck between stations, and it's cranking the volume to max trying to find a broadcast. How long do we have? I don't know, but Miller's gone. He went to a consultant in Chicago 2 weeks ago and never came back. I looked at the blood on my hand. I'm coming to you. No, she snapped. Don't. I'm being watched. Not by the SUVs, by the cleaners. They're the ones they send when the tech starts to rot. They don't want the hardware falling into the wrong hands, even if it's broken. If you have the bleed, you're a liability. The line went dead. I didn't pack a bag. I grabbed my jacket, my keys, and a heavy iron pry bar from my toolkit. I walked out to the truck, but I didn't even get the key in the ignition before the passenger door opened. A man climbed in. He was wearing a beige windbreaker and a baseball cap. He looked like someone's uncle at a backyard barbecue. He smelled like peppermint and antiseptic. Drive, Benjamin, he said. He didn't have a gun out. He didn't need one. His presence felt like a physical weight pressing down on the cab of the truck. Where? Somewhere quiet. We need to discuss the reclamation process. I pulled out of the lot, my hands trembling. This wasn't the uncle version of my father's friends. This was something else. As I drove toward the old quarry, the sensory bleed spiked. I could hear the friction of the tires on the asphalt as a deafening roar. I could see the heat signatures of the streetlights. You're suffering, the man said. He sounded genuinely concerned. The dark node trick was clever. Sarah was always one of our most creative assets. But the human brain wasn't meant to host a dead network. It's like leaving a corpse in a living room, Ben. Eventually, the rot spreads. I'm not going back to a lab, I said, my voice cracking. There is no lab for you anymore. You're a Class A failure. We just want the hardware. It's proprietary. Then take it, I spat. Cut it out of me. The man smiled, and for a second, I saw his eyes. They weren't blue or brown. They were a flat, shimmering silver, the same color as the mesh. We intend to, but the integration is deep. To retrieve the mesh intact, the host must be neutralized. It's a very clean process, much cleaner than the fire. I slammed on the brakes. The truck skidded on a patch of black ice, spinning 180 degrees before slamming into a snowbank at the edge of the quarry. The man in the windbreaker didn't even brace himself. He sat perfectly still as the glass shattered around us. I lunged for the pry bar on the floor. I swung it with every bit of human strength I had left. The iron bar hit his shoulder with a sickening thud, but he didn't flinch. He grabbed my wrist, and I felt my radius snap like a dry twig. I screamed, but the sound was drowned out by a sudden, piercing whine in my ears. The mesh behind my ear flared with heat. The pain is just data, Benjamin, the man said, leaning in close. Let go of the interface. He reached for the back of my head, his fingers elongated and cold. But as he touched the skin behind my ear, something happened. The status deceased command I'd uploaded in the warehouse, it hadn't just been a lie for the servers. It was a Trojan horse. I'd buried a piece of myself in the network, a recursive loop of human noise that the system couldn't parse. When he touched me, he didn't just touch a host, he touched the loop. His silver eyes widened, his jaw dropped. A sound like a modem screeching tore out of his throat. He wasn't a man, he was a high-tier interface, a cleaner meant to bridge the gap between the project and the world, and I was a corrupted file. I felt the heat from my chest, the old Class A power surge back one last time. It wasn't the project's power, it was the friction of my soul fighting the machine. I grabbed his head with my good hand. Delete, I whispered. The white light from the warehouse returned, but this time, it wasn't a scream, it was a vacuum. I felt the energy drain out of him, flowing into me, and then out into the cold winter air. The silver in his eyes dimmed. His skin turned a dull, waxy gray. He slumped against the seat, a hollow shell. I fell out of the truck and into the snow. My broken arm was on fire. My head was pounding so hard I couldn't see straight. I crawled away from the vehicle, gasping, waiting for the SUVs to appear, waiting for the end. But nothing happened. The silence returned. Only this time, it was different. The hum in the walls was gone. The heartbeat of the neighbors was gone. The thermal vision faded, replaced by the dull, gray reality of a snowy ditch in Ohio. I reached behind my ear. The skin was smooth. The port, the mastoid integration, the hard lump of the mesh, it was gone. I don't know how, and I don't know why, but the feedback loop had burned it all out. I wasn't a dark node anymore. I wasn't even an asset. I was just a guy in a ditch with a broken arm. I walked 3 miles to a gas station. I told the clerk I'd crashed my truck. I went to a regular hospital, sat in a regular waiting room, and got a regular cast put on by a doctor who didn't look at my blood work like it was a miracle. "You've got some high blood pressure, son," the doctor said, looking at his clipboard, "and you need to watch your cholesterol. You're getting older." I laughed until I cried. I never saw Jax again. I never heard from Sarah. I don't know if the other nodes survived the purge, or if I was the only one who found the exit door. I'm 30 now. I have a scar on my arm, a hitch in my hip, and a slight tremor in my left hand when I get tired. I get the flu every February, and I have to wear glasses to read the menu at Pete's Diner. My father passed away last year. He died in his sleep, in his own bed, with no black SUVs in the driveway. At the funeral, Petra leaned in and whispered, "I'm glad you're still here, Ben." "Me too, Petra," I said. "Me too." Every morning, I wake up and check my reflection. I see the wrinkles around my eyes. I see the gray hairs starting to show at my temples. I see a man who is slowly, beautifully falling apart. Ethelgard wanted to save me. They wanted to make me perfect, eternal, and efficient. But I've learned that the most important part of being alive isn't the recovery. It's the degradation. It's the fact that it ends. The silence of a truly normal life is louder than I expected. After the cleaner went cold in my truck and the mesh finally burned out of my bone, I expected to feel a sense of grand, cinematic relief. Instead, I just felt heavy. I felt the weight of gravity on my joints and the slow, rhythmic ticking of a clock that no longer had a backup battery. I moved to a small town in Oregon, as far away from the humidity of the East Coast and the ghosts of Ohio as I could get. I took a job at a local library, shelving books and fixing the occasional jammed printer. It's quiet work, the kind of work where the biggest drama of the day is a misplaced copy of a mystery novel. But old habits die hard. For the first 2 years, I still check the rearview mirror every time I hit a red light. I still scan the tree line for the glint of a lens or the matte finish of a black SUV. I lived in a state of perpetual flinch, waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting for Ethelgard to realize that their Trojan horse hadn't just deleted a file, it had walked away with the hardware. The realization that they were truly gone didn't happen all at once. It happened in small, mundane increments. It happened the day I got a toothache, a real, agonizing, throbbing toothache that didn't heal in an hour. I had to go to a dentist, sit in a chair that smelled of peppermint, and pay $400 for a root canal. I walked out of that office with a numb jaw and a massive grin. Ethelgard wouldn't have let a tooth decay. They would have optimized the enamel. The pain was proof of my independence. It happened the day I saw a silver sedan in the grocery store parking lot. My heart hammered against my ribs, uneven and panicked. But when the driver stepped out, it was just an old woman in a sun hat, struggling with her bags. I didn't have a neural spike. I didn't see her heat signature. I just saw a neighbor. I helped her with her groceries, and she gave me a lemon bar. But the real closure came last month. I found a letter in my mailbox. No return address, no stamp, just my name, Benjamin, written in a hand that looked familiar. For a second, the old coldness clawed at my throat. I took it inside and sat at my kitchen table, a steak knife in my hand, just in case. I opened it. Inside was a single photograph. It was a picture of a park in a city I didn't recognize. In the center of the frame was a woman sitting on a bench, reading a book. She had a heavy flannel shirt on, and her left hand was resting on her knee. I looked closer. Her hand was steady. No twitch. No 5-second glitch. It was Sarah. On the back of the photo, a single sentence was scrawled in messy human ink. "The fire is out for everyone." I sat there for a long time, holding that piece of paper. If Sarah was alive, if she was steady, it meant the kill command hadn't just hidden us. It had severed the tether for good. We weren't nodes anymore. We were just people scattered across the map, living out our borrowed time in the most boring ways possible. I'm 35 now. My back hurts when it rains, and I have to watch my salt intake. I have a girlfriend named Claire who thinks I'm a bit of a mystery because I don't like talking about my childhood, but she loves me because I'm a good listener, and I never panic when the power goes out. Sometimes she'll catch me staring at the scar behind my ear. "What are you thinking about?" she'll ask, running her thumb over the jagged skin. "Just thinking about how lucky I am to be falling apart," I'll say. She laughs and calls me a weirdo, and then we go back to deciding what to have for dinner. I don't know what Ethelgard was trying to build. I don't know if they were trying to save humanity or just replace it with something more durable, but I know they failed. They failed because they forgot that the parameters don't account for the soul. They forgot that a man would rather die as a wreck than live as a machine. Tonight, I'm going to sit on my porch and watch the sunset. I'm going to feel the chill in the air and the slight ache in my knees. I'm going to drink a beer that will probably give me a headache tomorrow. I am Benjamin Miller. I was 6 years old when I died in a fire, and I've been dying every day since. And honestly, I've never felt better.